What's going on, everyone? Today we'll be ranking what I consider to be the 10 best NEN abilities in the series. So starting off the list at number 10. At number 10, we have something that many people might think is a little bit higher up. But I'm putting Phaeton's Rising Sun here. While there is usually something to be said about versatility in general, sometimes a flaming spirit bomb of destructive power is all you really need. The more damage that Phaeton has taken, the more powerful Rising Sun is. The downside being that while this is strong enough to vaporize enemies, it could also affect himself if he wasn't in his armor. This also goes for any of his friends or allies nearby. Between the possibility that this can easily go wrong and the very straightforward, one kind of use that this ability has, it's just unfortunate that it can't go higher up. If we're taking into consideration the rest of Phaeton's abilities specifically through Painpacker, he has the potential to do a lot more. We've only really seen 1 or 2 forms of Painpacker, so really, who knows what else he can do. But for now, Rising Sun is falling into 10th. Kite's Crazy Slot is our number 9. A roulette spins, granting him a number between 1 and 9, giving him a random weapon associated with that number. We have seen that to include a scythe, a mace, and a gun. However, we have 6 other forms we don't really know about. Each of these weapons is very powerful, and Kite is a master, with all of them making this a very good mix of versatility and power. The downside of this is that obviously it is still very random. So despite the fact that Kite is a master with each one of these tools individually, some are better suited to situations than others just by design. In the majority of cases though, he should be pretty fine as long as there aren't any cats around. Number 8 is one I find extremely creepy, being Illumi's Needle People. By sticking needles into the head of a person and then giving them an order, Illumi is able to create a more or less zombie which works for him until they die or complete a task. He can also put a second needle in the person to make them more capable, being able to speak or drive things like that. However, the true value of this is the sheer number of people he can implant this in. This isn't exactly a one-person type of thing, and instead he can create an entire army if he wants to, and making an army of zombie slaves. This is a pretty solid ability. Of course, just like Phaeton, which I'm picking up a theme with the Phantom Troop members. Illumi can also do a few other things with his needles if he wants, which aren't really being taken into consideration here. Things like disguising himself, for example. They do offer a pretty wide variety of abilities. But for right now, we're only focusing on Needle People specifically. In 7th place, we have a kind of supportive ability with Machi's NEN Stitches. This is oriented towards healing, and it's just insanely powerful. Using threads made of NEN Machi can sew up injuries much like normal stitches. However, the healing properties are so much stronger, even in cases where people's arms have been entirely cut off. Machi can still sew them back on, and the newly reattached limb is functional immediately. And I just think that anything that can reattach a missing limb is probably pretty phenomenal, while it's not being taken into consideration for this specific ability. She can also use these threads more offensively, to capture opponents or manipulate them. Whether you want to consider that in the stitching ability or NEN threads in general is kind of up to you. But even in isolation, this is just a very strong and useful technique. At number 6, we have an incredibly powerful ability in Crollo Lucifer's Bandit Secret. Honestly, due to their similarities, it was between including Bandit Secret or Miriam's Aura Synthesis. I think as a general ability, Horosynthesis is probably dozens of times stronger. However, it's kind of wasted on Meruem. It allows him to absorb the NEN of those that he eats, adding it to his own power. But the thing is, Miriam is already basically unlimited when it comes to NEN, and he's already much stronger than really anyone else in the series. The only effort that he really had to put in for his fight with Netero was keeping his opponent alive, and like who else is really going to compete with him at that point? So if his ability could be given to anyone in general, sure, but because it's on Meruem, I don't think it's very valuable. Actually, instead, we're going to go with Bandit Secret. By going through a very complicated list of limitations and procedures, Crollo is able to steal the net abilities of living people and store them within his book. He can use up to 2 of these abilities at once. But once the person has died, they're removed from the book. While this can be very, very strong, it's honestly more about the versatility this offers. The obvious downside is that there are so many limitations involved in getting the new abilities, using them, and keeping them. Because if the person dies, it's gone. Even with those limitations considered though, it definitely helps Krillo be much more efficient, much more effective, and it definitely fits his character very well, as he leads the Phantom Troop using their abilities for his will, and Bandit's secret is just kind of that embodied as NEN. With that said though, like I said earlier, if you feel that aura synthesis is better for this list, I totally get it. At number 5, we have a Chimera Ant Royal Guard with Shia Poof and his Beelzebub. This is just kind of a very useful and versatile ability. The basics of it allow Poof to break down into many mini versions of himself, really getting as small as he'd like to. However, at the point where he becomes smaller than a fly, he is no longer able to see all of it. These mini versions of himself are still controlled by himself simultaneously, and very much a kind of hive mind mentality on top of that. If any of them are destroyed by physical force, they can just be reformed that. Said if they are destroyed by something like fire or electricity, the healing isn't really an easy process. If it can happen at all, this ability can be used to overwhelm opponents purely through numbers, escape from traps or cages dodge, attacks or spy on enemies just the wide range of options that this offers, especially in someone in Chiapu's role, is an invaluable tool for the character. Number 4 is one which might surprise you, but it is Nov's Hide and Seek. It might not be the most deadly ability, but the utility that this offers, and the ability to create a pocket dimension with multiple sections to it, is just about as good as you can get. He can hold a large number of people inside, and doors can be set up ahead of time, making this essentially a secret tunnel that for the most part cannot be detected, which I don't know if you're trying to fight a war against Chimera Ants would be a great way to get into their territory. It's good for hiding mobility storage and so much more that. There are very few abilities in the series that offer utility and versatility in the way that Hide and Seek does. Our number 4 could honestly be swapped with Bungee Gum, but here we have Kurapika's Emperor Time. This is kinda like Kurapika's version of Gon's transformation. It's an ability that drastically increases his own performance at the cost of his own life. The major difference here being that Kurapika's only costs him 1 hour of life for every second in this mode, so it works out to about 1 week of his life every 3 minutes of use. While this is still a lot of time to lose, it is very different context for the character using it. Gon is this bright and joyful person with a lust for life, and Kurapika really doesn't care what happens to himself as long as he can get revenge on the Phantom Troop. While in most cases, I would say this is way lower on the list purely based on the cost in Karnataka's specific situation. I think it is totally reasonable. So what does the ability actually do well? Emperor's Time raises the force and accuracy of all NEN categories while keeping the level the same. Basically, it allows him to make proficient use of every type of NEN, even if he doesn't have much expertise now. Number 3 is probably going to surprise a lot of people, but Moral's Deep Purple takes this easily to me. And to be honest, it is kind of the last fair entry in this list. This ability is probably the only thing with more versatility than Bungee Gum, and along with that versatility, it also adds a lot of complexity. All of Deep Purple's abilities revolve around smoke, which Moral can manipulate. However, if he wants, he can make items such as ropes, plants like grass, animals like rabbits, or even people who are capable of speech, and who are individually very strong and fast as well. On top of that, he can change its color and camouflage it into its surroundings. He can make them as durable as they need to be, to the point where they're almost indestructible, or he could make up to 216 dolls by spreading his aura very thin. But he can also make that number much smaller to make much stronger smoke people. Just the range and possibility that comes with this ability is phenomenal. There is no real restriction on it. You're able to create whatever you want and for as subtle as an ability. As it is, it just kind of dominates any situation you might find it in for the versatility possibility, and just overall usefulness of this net ability in every situation it has to be. Moving into our number 2. We have what is probably unanimously one of the strongest abilities in the series with Netero's Bodhisattva. While it is mostly immobile, it allows for devastating sets of attacks with near-endless patterns and incredible speed anyone other than. Meruem probably wouldn't have been able to deal with this because it's just so oppressive. The only weakness that this ability has is that Netero has an unconscious tendency to rely on specific patterns, and Meruem picked up on it. Furthermore, anyone other than Netero probably wouldn't have been able to make full use of the technique due to the speed required to actually use it efficiently. In Netero's hands, though, it is easily very high up on everyone's list, and I think you'd be crazy not to have it in your top 5. With that said, though, I can understand people putting it as low as number 5 based on the restrictions of immobility, the need for speed, and the size of the ability. Regardless, though, without question, this is a devastatingly powerful then ability. My runner-up and our number 1 is Nanaka's Wish Granting. I can totally understand people putting this a bit lower, as Nanaka themselves is kind of a strange existence with their own set of rules. However, to me, this is just on a different league. Nanaka can take control of Alaka to grant one wish for someone, and there is likely no limit to what she can do for. Example, she can make people float, teleport them to another continent, and she was even able to remove the condition of Gon's transformation and heal him. It really doesn't stop there, as Kilauea even explains that there's probably nothing she can't do. The cost of this wish is the next person that Alika requests something has to complete 3 tasks for her, even if they are completely separate of the situation entirely. If the requests are declined 4 times, other people will die as a result, with the minimum being 2 people being the person that Alika is making a request to, and the person that they love most. Both of them will instantly be crushed to death. Following that, more and more people will die depending on the size of the previous wish. Those people are decided based on who has spent most time with the person Alika is requesting things to, even if they aren't good friends. These people will all be wrung out to death on top of all that. Killua has his own ability to offer commands rather than wishes, which have their own set of conditions that are much lighter. While the possible backlash is definitely something to consider, I mean the ability to warp reality and fulfill any wish without the wisher, paying the cost directly is probably something that is impossible to really rank. Fairly the only real restriction on Nanaka is that she needs to take control of Alaka, and that she can't make wishes for herself, but outside of that, unlimited power and possibility are kind of on the table, and that's why she's my number 1. And there you have it, my opinion on what are the 10 best NEN abilities throughout Hunter x Hunter.